Signed.
So welcome to our committee meeting this afternoon, and welcome to all members that are joining us remotely through video conference. Members, this meeting will be recorded and broadcast through Parliament buildings and online. Members, you're very welcome to use your mobile devices so long as you put them into airplane mode, and I don't know where my phone is because I will need to do that immediately first, because no doubt I will be the first to be cut out. So, but you can connect to the Wi-Fi. Are members happy to proceed with the agenda?
Yep. Okay,
thank you. First item on the agenda is apologies. I haven't received any apologies. No apologies have been received. As members, have any of you received an apology from any of your colleagues? Okay. Okay. I want to just formally say that I'm delighted to be joining the members this afternoon as chair of the committee. And I want to formally thank my colleague and the previous committee chair, Colin McGrath, for his sterling work as committee chair. And hopefully I won't let all the good work that he has done go to waste, and we will work very positively and collaboratively together. Our committee here has a wide reach. And I do recognise the enormous responsibilities of the First and Deputy First Minister. And can I say that we all know that the Executive Office and the head of the Civil Service and all our executive ministers and their departments have enormous burden of responsibility on them. Even I would say before we had the COVID pandemic, the burden was immense and the workload was immense of this committee, and it's significant. And considering that we have the responsibility of holding to account the role of the Executive Office and supporting much needed improvements in the way our government operates, and it's my intention to support the work of the First and Deputy First Minister and hopefully see an end to a silo approach to government here in this executive. I'm personally very passionate about the many challenges of our committee, and particularly I'm passionate about the COVID recovery and the COVID recovery plan and the future of our high streets and our city centres. And also, I mean, we have really very serious work to do in relation to the institutional abuse and, of course, moving on from the events of the past in relation to conflict. So it's a tough schedule, folks. I'll be looking for your support and for your help, and I will be here to support and help you, and I'm anxious that we all make progress together. Members, I think it's important at this point to acknowledge developments in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol in light of the business in the committee today. Items 5.1 to 5.6 on pages 15 to 30 of the committee pack outline the proposals from the European Commission to address a range of issues relating to the protocol. Items 5.14 and 5.15 on pages 22 and 23 of the table pack are the European Commission and the UK press releases following the meeting on the 15th of October between Maris Sefcovic and Lord Frost. No doubt in the course of our discussions and briefing later on, members will have an opportunity to discuss all of these recent developments. So can we move on maybe to item number 3, draft minutes. The draft minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of October 2021 are at page 6 of the meeting pack. Members, are you content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of that meeting?
Yep.
And you're happy that I sign them on your behalf? Item number 4, matters arising. Members, at your last meeting, the House of Lords Constitution Committee had sent a request for attendance at a meeting. An alternative date for this committee has been given for the 4th of November, Thursday the 4th of November at 10 a.m. Are members of the committee happy to attend this? Yeah. Okay. Can I ask members, could they confirm their attendance with the clerk of the committee? Okay. Item number 5, correspondence. There are 9 items of correspondence from pages 15 to 39 in the meeting pack. 7 items were tabled this morning in the table pack. Can I refer to items 5.16 on page 24 of the table pack? It's a request from the Centre of Cross-Border Studies for the background to the committee's request for research on participatory policy making. I would seek the members' agreement to write to the Centre of Cross-Border Studies to explain the committee's interest in this particular area and stating that it was an action from the presentation from the Community Foundation on the 9th of June. Members, you will also note an additional correspondence that was distributed by email this morning from a councillor in Derry City and Strabane District Council raising concerns regarding the Executive Office tender for lived experience research in relation to the refugee integration strategy. The initial concern, it's my understanding, is that the time for tender application was too short. The tender application, I think, was issued on the 6th of October and closes on the 22nd of October. Members, I'm seeking just your agreement that we write to the department initially just to ask them perhaps for an extension to the tender deadline and to invite maybe officials to come before the committee at the next meeting just to give us more detail on that actual tender process. Are members content that I proceed? Okay. Okay. Item number 6 is our forward work programme. And can I draw your attention to page 41 of the meeting pack for the forward work programme, October to November 2021. Members, are you content to note the forward work programme? Okay. So that is our housekeeping business to date, and at this point I would like to ask the members of the Seanad Special Select Committee to join our meeting. Good afternoon. You're absolutely very welcome here to our magnificent Parliament buildings here in Stormont. It is absolutely a delight to actually have people attending in person. I know that the Seanad Special Select Committee has been working with this committee. I think the last session was on the 10th of March, and it's great now to have the first face-to-face meeting with yourselves. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome you, Lisa Chambers, as chairperson of the Seanad Special Select Committee on the withdrawal agreement from the UK from the EU. I would also like to welcome Malcolm Byrne, Senator Malcolm Byrne. I would like to welcome Niall O'Donnell. I would like to also welcome Roisin Garvey.
To haven't appeared
on the screen. Okay, so that's all that we have joined us so far, unless others join us virtually at a later time. So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Chair, to start the oral briefing.
Sinead, thank you very much, and congratulations on becoming chair of the committee. And it's fantastic to be here in person in Stormont with members of the Seanad Special Select Committee on Brexit. It's great to have face-to-face engagement, and as is the case with Brexit always, a lot has happened since we last met, It's a very fluid situation, and we're very keen to hear the views of you, Chair, and of your members on the current situation, I suppose in particular in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, probably the 4 position papers that were published by Mara Sefcovic, the EU Commissioner, and to hear the views of members here on what's contained within those in terms of the solutions offered and how we might be of assistance. I think we're probably all in agreement that we need to find a solution that works for the island, and that's always been our view. And certainly as Chair, I have endeavoured with all of the committee members to make sure that all voices on the island are heard and reflected in our work as a committee, and we're very keen to make sure that all voices are reflected. Where we're at the moment, we published our interim report before the summer recess in July, so we're now coming towards the end of our work as a Special Select Committee, and we're due to publish our final report in December. So we will certainly be including the engagement that we're having today in that report. And as you mentioned, here with us today we have Senator Niall O'Donnell here on my right, Senator Malcolm Byrne just to the right here as well, and Senator Roisin Garvey, members of the team here today. And our Clerk Christy Hyland is to my right as well. So we're very eager to hear the views of your committee, and perhaps even a back and forth, some Q&A. We're keen to have as fluid an engagement as we can, rather than just making grand speeches. I think it would be good to hear what people think. But yeah, maybe a focus predominantly on the protocol, I think, but also to hear what you think of the work of our committee and what we can do in terms of reflecting your views in our work as we come towards publishing our final report. So, Chair, what I might do is just give an opportunity to my members to say a couple of opening remarks, and then I'll leave to you, Chair, to direct proceedings for the meeting. And so I'll hand over to Niall O'Donnell first.
Carly, thank you, chairs, and thanks to colleagues here in the Assembly for the invitation and the opportunity to engage. I think our chair has outlined our perspective on this. This committee has been, I have to say, in the midst of quite a lot of uncertainty and difficulty around the issue. This committee has always tried to work very collaboratively and as positively as we can, and I think we have been reasonably successful in doing that. And one of the key, I suppose, engagements that we were anxious to have was with the institutions here in the North, and with the Assembly and Executive in particular. So this really strengthens that work, Chair, and I hope it's not, even though we have a relatively short time frame left to carry out our work, I hope it's not the last, because this is a live dynamic we're dealing with, as we all know. I have the rather unique position, Chair, of being from the North and being elected in the Seanad. So that gives me a wee bit of a different perspective when coming to this committee, and indeed a meeting like this. When our chair asked if there's anything from MLA colleagues here, I could probably guess what some of them are going to ask, because there are quite a lot of the things that I would ask, I imagine, at our own committee meetings as well. So this is a really welcome opportunity, and certainly, like other colleagues, I look forward to today's meeting and further engagement beyond today as well. So, Garamagat.
And Senator Malcolm Byrne.
Thank you to both chairs for the opportunity to be here today, and I would certainly agree the opportunity to physically meet. I think one thing we can all agree on is we've got a little bit tired of all of the virtual meetings. This will hopefully be the opportunity to share ideas. I think the one good benefit of our committee is, in many ways, we try to avoid a lot of what we'd call the high politics stuff that may be above our pay grade, and to focus on issues that are of direct concern to citizens and businesses. So whether that's around issues with regard to cross-border trade, or whether it's about data transfers north-south or indeed east-west, what we've tried to look at is how are the implications of the Brexit decision, which we respect, how are the implications of that being felt on the ground? What measures do we need to put in place so that the impact is minimised on individual citizens and businesses? And then how can we look at, in this new relationship on these islands, how can we look at ensuring further cooperation among citizens, among businesses, but also, we believe, among parliamentarians and legislators. So I think it's very much, the approach we've taken is very much looking at practical issues, and I've certainly found we've learned a lot as well from listening to people, from everything to talk about, from milk to whiskey to bread, things that we may not necessarily think about but do have implications. And we come here in the hope to learn also and maybe to share experiences.
And Senator Roisin Garvey.
Dave, it's lovely to be here today. It's a huge honour because I've been reared coming up the north, but I never thought I'd make it to Stormont. My father was a Fianna Fáil councillor for many, many years, and he actually started twinnings between Newry and Mourne District Council and Clare County Council. So I grew up with DUP and UUP and SCLPs coming to our house, and it was a huge honour for us because it gives you different perspectives on things and stops you from being narrow-minded or judgmental. So that stood to me a lot, I think. And as a Green Party senator, one of the few, it also taught me to be able to work with everybody in all parties and not be limiting myself in that way either. So it's just great to be here today. It's an important committee that Lisa has led. Well done taking on the new role of chair. It's good we have 2 female chairs. It's always nice to see. And I look forward to listening to you more than speaking today, because I think I come from County West Clare down the very south, and I'd say I wouldn't be as tuned into the realities of what you're dealing with around borders, around businesses and the challenges you face as much as the people in this room. So thanks very much for having us.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here and for the intensive work that your committee has been engaged in. I suppose one of the issues that most concern all of us here in this room is that we want to protect our businesses and our citizens and ensure that the exit from the EU doesn't put any barriers in front of anybody on this island and between these islands. And that's the primary purpose, I think, of all elected members, is to ensure that we do good work and remove any obstacles in anybody's way. And we have been working very, very hard at that through the various committees that we have access to. I think within the context of the UK withdrawal, the biggest issue that we all have is that we feel that it's been done to us instead of us, being in charge and having a voice at the table. And that's one of the key areas that really focuses the minds of people here in this assembly. So I have a couple of questions that I would like to explore, in relation to your paper. Obviously, in the interim report, you have recommended that the Irish government must make every effort to ensure that the voice of citizens here in Northern Ireland is properly represented at the EU level. How do you envisage that can actually happen? Because that's one of the key issues here, that Northern Ireland people feel that they don't have that voice at the centre.
Yeah, I might take that, and if any of the other members want to pop in. We're still exploring that. One of the areas we discussed at great length was what we consider to be the democratic deficit that now exists in Northern Ireland, because as it stands, we fully accept and appreciate that you are subject to EU single market and customs rules, but you don't have a seat in terms of a Member of Parliament at the European table. So I would accept that there is a democratic deficit, and how do we address that to make sure, obviously as it stands, I certainly would take the view that the Irish government, I think, are doing their best to advocate for the island, all citizens on the island, and are trying to give that voice. And obviously all of your members here are doing the very same thing as well. I believe the route that's been looked at is through the joint committee. So that is, at the moment, you have Sir David Frost and Mara Sefcovic are the 2 representatives on that. And then there are subcommittees that feed into that. And that is supposed to, as I understand it, provide that voice. So when things do come up for discussion, be it current tensions or future challenges or areas where we may have differing opinions, that it will be worked through in those subcommittees that then feed into the joint committee, and that is supposed to give a voice. Now, I'm of the view that we need to, yes, give that space to work and see how it works, but I appreciate that I'm not sure that will ever fully meet what is being requested. And I'll be very honest and say I don't see a solution on the table as of yet in terms of how we do provide that democratic input. So that's one of the areas I actually very much welcome the views of your own members, Chair, as to what you think are the solutions in that regard, how you feel about the committee that is currently there, the subcommittees that feed into that. Do you think that process can be improved upon in any way? I gather from, we actually had an engagement just last week with Department of Foreign Affairs officials around the dispute resolution mechanisms, both in the withdrawal agreement and the TCA, and how that works. And they were quite honest in saying that, okay, the committees are up and running, but they're very new, and they're still feeling their way through how this will bed in, because it is still a very novel situation that we're dealing with. So that's just, I suppose, a little bit of information as to where I think we're at now, but I think we have a long way to go on that. I don't know if any other members want to...
Yeah, well, I mean, Chair, I don't want to be too retrospective on this, but I mean, certainly we made the case, and there was legal advice at the time that said that it was within the gift of the Irish Government to allocate the 2 European Parliament seats that they gained as a result of Brexit to the north, and unfortunately that wasn't to be. But there is a clear argument and a clear rationale, as you and colleagues will appreciate, that there needs to be a formal representative structure now, whatever form that takes. Certainly in whatever view this committee takes on that going forward. I do think we certainly need the Irish Government to be in concert with us in relation to that, because apart from their obligations in the context post-Brexit, they also have their own constitutional obligations under Article 2, because Article 2 of Bunreacht na HÉireann says it's the birthright and entitlement of everyone born on this island to be part of the Irish nation. So we need to see an element of that being put into effect. So to be part of the Irish nation must mean to have a voice articulated on our behalf. So we need the Irish Government to come to that position in whatever shape it takes. But we also need the European institutions to understand that there is that democratic deficit as well, and there may need to be a look at bespoke arrangements. I mean, as I say, my preferred option and my party's preferred option at the time would have been the retention of those parliamentary seats, but unfortunately that has been and gone. But certainly I would agree with our chair that we don't have a firm position on that, but certainly we would be keen to hear your views and other views in terms of how we get to that position where we can articulate the voice of those who, A, want their voice to be articulated at that European level, and B, have the right to have their voice articulated at the European level as well.
Okay. In the context of your work with the report, how do you see the developments that have taken place in the last week in relation to the UK command paper, and then obviously the proposals last week from the European Commission? Because it's quite significant on both sides, the movement that has actually taken place. So again, to the chair.
Yes, I would say as a committee we haven't discussed that yet, so I can give you my view as a member of the Seanad, but this is not the position of our committee because we haven't taken a position yet on that. I would agree that I think there's been a considerable degree of movement. If you look at, in particular, the 4 position papers, and I think it's evident there was a lot of listening, there was a lot of engagement. It appears with businesses and with citizens in Northern Ireland, which I think was a good thing. I have to say I do feel that Commissioner Šefčovič did step up to the mark in that regard and did his work well. That may not be the view of everybody, but I do think he tried his best to really get the views on the ground as to what were the blockages, what were the difficulties in the practicalities of implementing the protocol day to day, be it on SBS, be it on customs, import, export, how it was affecting businesses on the ground, hauliers, those at the ports. And I do think that the solutions offered do seem very reasonable, practical, logical. They've flowed from evidence received from engagement with lots of stakeholders. And it is a very bespoke offering that has been put on the table. In terms of the command paper from the UK, I respect the position of the United Kingdom government to give their view. I might not agree with all of it, but it is a sovereign government and they are most entitled to articulate their position. I appreciate there's still a gap for the two sides to meet, but as with everything that has been through the Brexit process, further engagement and dialogue, I do think we'll get there. I do think we'll get there. And I think that the people in Northern Ireland have been very solutions focused, very practical, and looking at ways to make life easier for businesses and citizens. So I do think that gap can be closed, and I think it's a positive that everybody's still around the table and people are still talking. So that's always a good thing, and I don't think I can offer anything further that would be helpful or useful at this time. I don't know if any of the other members.
I think a lot of these elements obviously come down to trust and pragmatism, and I mean, what would be useful for us to hear as well is from your constituents or businesses who are impacted, because as I would have outlined earlier, you know, there are always going to be high politics going on, and there are bigger issues. I think our focus has to be, you know, those businesses that we all represent. You know, how can we make life easier for them? We're dealing with it, you know, obviously for importers and exporters, some of the challenges. So I come from Wexford in the southeast. We've actually benefited from Brexit because Rosslare Europort is based there, and it suddenly experienced a boom because the land bridge is not being used in the UK. But there are hauliers and others have identified a number of serious problems, particularly due to the capacity in Rosslare. So what we've looked at doing is, okay, how can we improve facilities there to make it easier? So I think it'll be useful for us to hear the experiences of businesses that you're dealing with. What pragmatic or practical solutions, obviously working within the framework that has been agreed between the UK and the EU, but what pragmatic solutions can we come up with that will make life easier for those businesses? And I think that would certainly help us in the work that we're doing.
Well, thank you for that. I suppose it's no surprise. Politically, this is a very difficult topic, and to find the one voice politically around solution finding has been extremely difficult, and it hasn't made it any easier. But what has been really significant is the business community. They have really stepped up to the mark. They've engaged, they've participated in solution finding for some of the areas that they were having difficulties with. They've been very practical. And what we do appreciate is that there has been a listening mode taking place, particularly within the European Commission, and we do welcome some of the solutions that have been found for major issues that our business community were experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So those practical movements from the EU Commission has been very, very welcome from our business community, and I've spoken to many business organisations in the last couple of weeks, and since 2016 we've been very closely engaged with them. So, you know, those movements are very solid and very, very welcome, and as a committee and as an executive, we need to make sure that we're all in solution mode to see if we can work with and play the ball that we're played, or play the game that we're played. Just as I was coming up this morning, I was listening to Radio Foyle, and one of the local business leaders was talking about his business and how in the last couple of months he has seen a 16% increase in his business. It's a printing company that he's involved in, and the increased orders were as a result of the protocol and how it was of value and bringing him more customers to his business. Within the context of your engagement, have you found other businesses experiencing the same uplift for their businesses because as a result of the protocol? And is there any way that you are trying to engage or measure just the impact of the protocol, either negatively or positively, in the context of business north and south?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've heard, particularly actually the drinks industry were quite adamant that they had seen a lot of benefit around the protocol, as have others, and that has kind of developed I suppose, as the committee has progressed, and I suppose as the protocol and the outworkings of the protocol have come to be, because anything in Nicely obviously has to get through its immediate teething problems. And I suppose from our perspective, while we haven't necessarily done a particular engagement on this issue, we have seen the CSO statistics around the quite stark increase in trade north to south and south to north. Now, we don't have the figures yet that would be as kind of as sort of accurate on the east-west. But certainly what we're seeing publicly published and released by arm's length bodies and government agencies certainly is correlating with what we were beginning to hear. I think it's fair to say from businesses and indeed their representative organisations that the protocol was there for a reason, and that they were certainly utilising the benefits and the protections and the insulations that it was providing them as businesses from their own perspective.
We hear a lot about supply chains as well, and the different change in supply chains. Again, in your interim report, have you been looking and interrogating the data, just what type of products that are looking for other solutions on island? We know from our conversations, just come from the Economy Committee, that there is a lot of movement in supply chains. Have you drilled down in any of that within your report?
Yeah, I mean, not massively in depth, but we have had some engagement, particularly, say, for example, around whisky and dairy. We know that there was issues around the rule of origin, because obviously that in that industry didn't really see any border. It was all the same milk. The cows don't recognise what county they're in, never mind whether there are any barriers there. So there was particular issues around the rule of origin for the whisky and dairy industry. We actually had an engagement yesterday with Medicines for Ireland, who have spoken about their supply chains, in particular challenges of trade between GB and NI, but then not so much between North and South. And so we know that for certain importers, they were looking to other locations to make it a bit easier to get goods. So there has been some impact, but it's probably too early yet to know the full impact of that. We are having an engagement very shortly at our next meeting next week with the ESRI, who we did engage with in our first, in the run of our first interim report, and we're hoping to have a final engagement with them to just look and see if they got further data for us around that whole issue. They did speak about the protocol, and the evidence to our committee from the ESRI was that it did present an opportunity for Northern Ireland if it were to be, I suppose, locked down, for want of a better phrase, that if there is uncertainty as to whether it will remain or not, people may not invest on foot of it. But it does present an opportunity if there's full support to maintain the protocol. So that was the view of the ESRI quite a number of months ago, and we will have a chance to ask further questions again next week of them.
That would be interesting. Can I ask our Deputy Chair, would you like to come in with...
Thanks very much for coming along today. I really appreciate it. I think it's so important that we engage North, South, East, West and continue to have that dialogue. I think it's just so important that we keep that going. So thanks for coming along today. As the Chair said, I think it felt in Northern Ireland, perhaps, or certainly she felt that Brexit happened, particularly without any input from Northern Ireland or any say. Rather, it was a UK vote, and the United Kingdom, regrettably, in my opinion, as a unionist that campaigned to remain, left the European Union, but that was the democratic vote. What had no democratic input whatsoever was the Northern Ireland Protocol from anybody in Northern Ireland whatsoever. And we talk about the democratic deficit. I think the point that the Chairman well made, and I'm glad that you've picked up on and accepted there, because I put it to anybody in any other part of Europe, including the Irish Republic, who is a true democrat, that they could never accept being a rule taker and being under the jurisdiction of a foreign court without any democratic say. And to me as a democrat, I find that completely unacceptable. And I haven't found to date anybody offering anything more than lip service to that issue. And I think it's important to get that on the record. And you'll say, well, we'd like you to maybe to feed in to say what the alternative that is. My alternative is I don't want to see the protocol in place. I would be seen apparently by some, described by some maybe as a slur, that I'm too progressive and a liberal unionist. I don't believe that there's any such thing as a liberal unionist. You're either a unionist or you're not. I believe passionately in the union, progressive in some issues, but people from all spectrums of unionism are opposed to the protocol. In the most recent poll, nearly 50% of the country have concerns about the protocol. I'm just hoping, is that reflected in the committee's evidence and in the report that you're bringing forward? But you mentioned as part of the democratic deficit, you felt that the Irish government was speaking for all of Ireland. I have yet, in my opinion, never heard the Taoiseach or the Taoiseach speak for unionism, and massive concerns among the unionist people here over how the protocol has been imposed without any democratic input, without any say from the people of Northern Ireland. Just interested to hear how you think that's reflected.
Yeah, Thank you very much, John. And it was your colleague Doug Beattie that we engaged with on the last occasion, and I'm
regards.
Tell him I send mine in return. But we very much appreciated his input at the time, because we really were eager to engage with unionism and with the community to make sure that it was reflected. And I hope that he felt that his views were reflected in our report. We made every effort to put those views in black and white in the report. So in terms of, to work backwards from the points that you made, I know that the Taoiseach, for having spoken to him directly about this, is very keen to make sure that all citizens feel represented. The Irish government are not elected by the people of Northern Ireland, but they do their best, in my view, to try and be a voice for the island at the Brexit table, very much acknowledging that there is no political representation from Northern Ireland at the negotiating table. There is in an indirect way through David Frost, but it's not a directly elected person. So they're very conscious of that, and I know this from speaking to the Taoiseach directly about it. In terms of the issues with the protocol, I'd be interested to hear the information that we receive is that the concerns around the protocol focused mainly around medicines, SPS, import-export, customs, so a lot to do with trade. We really hadn't received any notable correspondence or people raising issues around the European Court of Justice having jurisdiction over issues pertaining to the customs union and the single market. I can honestly say it's never come up until it has been raised very recently. So my understanding was the issues really pertain to the practicalities of the protocol actually working for businesses and citizens. The protocol, I fully accept that I think it was unfortunate that the institutions here weren't up and running at the time all of that was being negotiated, and that did leave a deficit, there's no doubt about that. And we were very conscious of that at the time, and at the time I was actually Brexit spokesperson for the opposition party in the last term. So we were very conscious of that and tried to do our best to articulate all views as best we could, but you're never fully in the shoes of another person, even though you might try your best to do that. The protocol in Northern Ireland was a result of 4 years of negotiations where at the end we had exhausted everything. There was no other option to try and ultimately prevent a border on the island of Ireland, which was a priority for the Irish government, because we were very concerned around what that would mean, culturally, socially and economically for the island. And we were very clear that our priority was to avoid a hard border. And in order to do that, the protocol was how we squared the circle, and it was a very unique and bespoke solution that was put together specifically for Northern Ireland. The European Court of Justice only has jurisdiction on matters pertaining to the customs union and the single market, because they are matters of European law, and they are the court of final arbitration. I'm not convinced that we'll ever see many cases being taken to the ECJ on foot of issues. I mean, the rules around the single market and the customs union they're in place nearly 40 years more. Everyone knows what they do, and I think it's reasonable that, given that they are the product, they go hand in glove. The customs union, single market and the ECJ, they're part of the same package. You can't really have access to the single market and the customs union without allowing the ECJ to be the court of final arbitration. But it's only on those issues where the ECJ has arbitrary role. It doesn't apply to any other aspect of life in Northern Ireland. It's just around the customs union and the single market. So I think that's an important point. We've always said if there are other solutions, we will always have an open mind, always. But I do think that what Mara Sefcovic put on the table in the position papers, I would hope that everybody would take an open mind to what's contained in those papers, because it's a considerable move from the EU Commission's point of view, I think, and it will remove a lot of the blockages that came up in that consultation from businesses and communities around what was actually bothering them with the protocol. It should solve a lot of it. But as I said to your colleague Doug, I fully accept that no matter how much tweaking we do with it, the very fact that it exists will always be an issue for some people. And I fully accept that and respect that. But I don't think I can offer a solution to that problem fully, if I can put it that way. And I don't know if any other colleagues want to...
Yeah, just very briefly, John, and thanks, Chair. I suppose I take your point, and I know the sincerity with which it's offered. I suppose the important thing to say, and this isn't an effort to try and shut any conversation down, because it's important we have the conversation for obvious reasons. But our brief and our remit is to engage, is to research, and it's then subsequently to present. So what we have tried to do through these engagements is get those voices around the table, and there'd be no hesitation or no reluctance on our part to ensure that that is ultimately reflected within our report. And we'll present that to the Irish Government, we'll present it to the European institutions and wherever else it needs to go. So there's no hesitation, and as Lisa has said, I mean, we engaged with Doug previously at the last meeting. It's good to see other voices around the table at this meeting who'll hopefully contribute their own perspective. But from we aren't here, you know, while we all are, you know, none of us are green in that sense, except Roisin, who is a green. But none of us are green enough to think we're here representing the government. We're here representing our committee. We're here to listen, and then ultimately we're here to reflect. So, you know, speaking as a shinner from the Strand, I'll have no hesitation in the report including the voice of unionists and loyalists and anyone else who wants to contribute to this committee, ultimately making part of our report, because that's what it's about, that's what it's for.
Yeah,
come back to me. I appreciate that feedback. That is really helpful. I know our party has put together a number of alternatives and a number of proposals, and perhaps Doug passed those on last time. I don't want to get into that session now, but I'm happy to forward them on to you if that hasn't already been done. Yeah. And these have been explored and pushed back, and we're willing to continually engage, because I think that is vitally important. I appreciate what you say, Chair, about the role of the ECJ and how invariably it's never really tested. Cases don't really end up there too much. I suppose my counter argument to that is we've never seen a situation where a country like Northern Ireland has been 1 foot in the United Kingdom in terms of its presence, and the other foot being in the single market, and how those things could come to loggerheads, and we end up being a guinea pig and a test case for every ECJ conflict. And then all of a sudden it is a big issue. So there's a lot of aspects of the protocol that perhaps haven't been raised, including the whole fact that those that were calling for rigorous implementation at the very start have now realised actually that the offerings of Lord Frost and Morris Escovitch last week are actually quite appealing, so compared to what it looked like at the beginning. So it's probably an evolving picture in that respect when we realise what actually comes out of it. So I would just say that point that you know, if we're going to be under the control of foreign law, it would necessitate at the very least democratic input, and that's not me accepting for any second the protocol, but that would need to be there. And just one final thing, Chairs, is you do talk about the business impact, and like, I'm not going to, as a former small business owner, I'm a families and small business and chair of the micro and small business APG here at Stormont. Undoubtedly there are people, businesses in Northern Ireland that are seeing benefits to the protocol, and Northern Ireland businesses are extremely robust given what they have been through for many, many years. They have built up a very thick skin and a strong backbone to deliver regardless of the circumstances they're presented with. So they will always make do and get on with the situation. The fact is that the true impact of the protocol hasn't been fully affected yet because we're still in grace periods. So it's, and how will they be affected? And granted, we will hopefully see massive changes to the protocol based on the ongoing negotiations, but I would say just because some businesses are doing well out of it, and fair play to them, and hopefully many more can do well out of it, I think there are many that are still feeling the pinch. And again, just to give you an example that I will send you through, the Social or Enterprise NI do a barometer 2 or 3 times a year, surveying the tens of thousands of businesses that they represent in Northern Ireland. But Northern Ireland is a micro and small business economy. 90% of our economy is made up of micro or small businesses, and they survey them every year. I'll send you through the report, and it touches on the protocol and the issues that they're facing, but over half have experienced, at the very least, administrative problems and the bureaucratic problems that come out of that. So I think that report would be very handy for you. I don't want to go into it in detail today again. I'll send it through to you because I think it would be very advantageous to the panel. That's all I have today. Happy to feed in as the debate goes on.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. And any information you have, we'd be very happy to take it on board and disseminate it across the committee. And I take on board that we haven't fully seen the impact of the protocol long term, and it's tricky in that you've got the joint committee that deals with the withdrawal agreement and the protocol, and then you've got the partnership committee that deals with the trade agreement, and the two have slightly different dispute resolution mechanisms. The ECJ is not the final arbiter for the trade agreement, which is the overarching agreement. Mm. And then if we have difficulties in 10-20 years' time with divergence and regulation, that there will potentially be challenges, there's no doubt about that. But I suppose, evidence we've had to our committee, and then my own personal view is that there's huge potential to be the only jurisdiction that has access to 2 huge markets. It'll never happen again, and I don't believe. I think it could be brilliant. Is what we would have heard, and you would hope that most things would never get to a point of going to the ECJ. It doesn't happen very often, but I appreciate that it could happen. I get that. But then I suppose you have to decide, weighing up the benefits and the pros and cons of having access to the single market and the customs union. Are you willing to, I suppose, compromise in some way and then have that oversight in order to have that access? And I suppose that's the trade-off. But we do take on board the democratic deficit issue, absolutely, and that will take. I think we'll be talking about this for quite some time. Actually, probably we may all be long gone and still talking about it. Anyways.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Deputy Chair, for your observations there. And I do think a lot more data and evidence is required, because we really need to drill down on the opportunities that may exist having access to 2 major markets. And there is a deficit of evidence at the moment, and I feel that the UK have a role to play in gathering that evidence just for our own benefit here for Northern Ireland. Can I ask Pat Sheen now to address the question?
Mille buchas le vas chat den youth falchurov I suppose I don't want to get into a knock about with John, but you did say you wanted to hear different perspectives.
Anyway.
And John talks about democratic deficit in the context of the protocol, and nobody here having a say over it. Well, the protocol was part of the withdrawal agreement that was voted on and passed in Westminster. And I mean, I've no time for the Westminster Parliament, and we best time for this particular British government. I think they're completely lacking in any honesty and integrity. But from a unionist perspective, I mean, that's democracy in action. A bill goes in front of Parliament and it's passed, and unionism wants to be part of that particular setup. I don't. Whereas in terms of Brexit, the North clearly voted against Brexit. Our voice was heard and then ignored in the context of all that. But in any event, I'm just making that point. On other issues, Malcolm talked about, there needs to be trust built and so on. And of course, we agree with that. And you've said yourself, Lisa, that this can be resolved, and everybody's trying to be in a mindset of resolving whatever problems exist with the protocol. And most of us accept that there are operational difficulties with the protocol that need tweaked or resolved or whatever. But then, we hear David Frost talking about the increase in north-south trade here is a problem that needs to be resolved. And, I'd like to hear your perspective on that. And given the utterances from other members of the British government recently, and Leo was out himself the other day, talking about how other countries, need to be sure that when the British make an agreement that they're going to hold to that agreement. So, I mean, maybe this is all, part of a negotiating process, and people are playing hard and so on. But it certainly doesn't augur well for any sort of resolution. So, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing the perspective of members of your committee on that.
Could I just say, I think that all of us want to see an increase in trade, both north-south and east-west, and trade between GB and NI, and the more that can be done in that regard, it benefits all of us. I think, we had quite an interesting engagement with Enterprise Ireland and with some of the other trade agencies. And the fact, for instance, that there is a new consulate opened in Manchester, along with new Enterprise Ireland offices, is testament to the fact that the government in the Republic wants to do far more business directly with the UK in spite of these difficult circumstances. I think if we look at the big picture, and there are going to be operational difficulties, I think what we all want to see is for all businesses on this island and to grow, and if as a result of that we increase trade, north, south, east, west, so much the better. There are going to be those practical measures. There are going to be, as Lisa said, there are going to be operational difficulties that we will need to work out. I would, Chair, and colleagues will know, I have an issue on the data regime, which they suspected I'm going to raise. I won't go at length, but I think it'll be useful to hear the perspective. I mean, one of the concerns that I would have in terms of an inhibition to trade is the UK government's decision to now look at carrying out a review of the data protection regime that will operate within the UK, because that will have very serious implications for business. And in terms of, John, your question around issues going to the ECJ, if we see a situation whereby the European Commission determines that the data adequacy regime that continues to operate in the UK isn't adequate, then we are going to run into, I believe, problems, because in what happens now, and we talked about it even in the healthcare area yesterday, apart from goods being traded, the amount of trade being done in services and the amount of data being shared north, south, east, west, and indeed between the UK and the wider EU, I certainly see that, my view is that is one of the most major potential immediate challenges that isn't being discussed. But I think specifically to your question, I think our committee views it as the more trade and more business that we can encourage on and between these islands, the better.
Yeah, Pat Gormaigat and Case. Thanks, Pat. And I suppose from our perspective too, what we need to get better at is actually articulating the benefits of the protocol. And we need to be better nuanced and perhaps even more assertive in that, appreciating that we all agree that if there are tweaks needed done, they need to be done for the benefit of everyone. I mean, we've heard a lot, and look, people are entitled to make the case if they're opposed to the protocol and they have objections with it. What I have asked for separately from this committee, just as a member of the Seanad, is for the various relevant Irish government ministers to come in and articulate the benefits that they see to the protocol, and whether it's a business brief, whether it's agricultural brief, whether it's through the European Affairs brief, that they're coming in and they're actually conveying that, and that argument isn't being lost, particularly when there is quite a large section of society, north and south, who are seeing and feeling the benefits of the protocol. So I think we need to get better at that here in Ireland, but also internationally as well, and get on the same level as others in terms of actually making a case for defending the protocol and what it's doing, appreciating that nothing's perfect, and appreciating the fact, as you rightly said, the protocol is in place because of Brexit, and we didn't want Brexit in the first place here. Chair, if I could just briefly say to the Vice Chair, because I didn't get the chance, I actually agree with John in one sense, in that we're still seeing the outworking of the protocol, and we still have some way to go in terms of that, and we should be alert to it. And look, I'm really keen to see where people are basing their statistics on around the East-West trade. I'd really love to see that as a member of this committee, and indeed as a member of the Seanad, because I think it would help inform the debate much better. But if we're going anecdotally, and we can only go anecdotally, I suppose, in that sense, John, I mean, I say respectfully, we're not seeing the level of empty shelves here that they're seeing across the water. We're not seeing the chaos in garage forecourts, and I think that in of itself is one of the arguments that needs to be made for the insulation that the protocol offers us all. But look, to go back to Pat's point, I actually just think the Irish government and indeed the EU need to just get a bit more match fit in terms of actually the practicalities of what the protocol does and the impact. And also, by the way, if I could say too, because some of our colleagues from the business community and even from the trade unions and elsewhere will come to a committee like ours, will come to meetings with our own relevant parties, and perhaps they'll articulate the benefits of the protocol that they're feeling. So they need to say that outside of the rooms as well, and I think we all need to maybe cut through some of the noise that's out. Particularly, I was as aghast at David Frost's remarks about the North-South trade being a problem that needed solved. That just tells you, and it's certainly what I was telling the Irish government in the Seanad before Brexit, during Brexit, and after Brexit, that the people who were leading the charge on Brexit were most definitely worth the watching.
Yeah, Pat, thank you very much for your remarks, and I think a lot of it has been covered by Malcolm and Niall. In terms of the comment about North-South trade, I can see why for some people that will be a frightening development. I can understand that. I don't agree with it, but I probably understand why the comment was made. But I do think that if there's increased trade in the island, it should be considered a good thing, I would have thought, because it's benefiting everybody on the island. But just in terms of remarks, and Malcolm's referred to the high-level politics, I think there's been some throwaway remarks at times on all sides, and I've no doubt that there are frustrations behind the scenes as to the actions and conduct of certain members at that negotiating table. But at the end of the day, if you throw the toys out of the pram, the people that get hurt are the citizens you're representing. So sometimes you have to rise above it and continue on and stay at the table. So I'm glad that that's happening. Thank you, Vash.
Okay, thanks for that. And just going to deal with just one other area, which isn't directly related to the protocol, but is part of the outworking of Brexit, and it's issues that the Irish government said they would make available to Irish citizens here in the north. You know, for example, access to the Erasmus courses, and more recently the COVID certificate. And I mean, I have been inundated with complaints and queries from constituents who are trying to access COVID certificate, and I actually tried myself a couple of weeks ago to access it and couldn't. I got to the very last section of it, and it wouldn't accept the QR code on the certificate here from the north. There are 2 QR codes, one for each vaccination. And funny enough, I was in the barber's last week and I was talking to the barber about it, and he says, well, what you need to do is screenshot the second QR code and upload it to the application. And that's what I did, and it was successful. But the point I'm going to make is I shouldn't have had to get that information from my barber. That information should be available, and it's a matter of the Dublin government being much more proactive. If they're saying Irish citizens here can access things like the COVID certificate, things like Erasmus, they need to be proactive dealing with this. And Niall for a long time has been banging on about having a passport office here in the north as well. And those are issues that the Dublin government really needs to take the lead on and come out and inform Irish citizens here in the north. You know, if there are heathen problems or there are issues with particular applications, they need to tell us how to resolve those problems.
Pat, I might count Malcolm on the Erasmus because he's he's on that committee. Yeah. I don't have any information on the COVID certificate.
I'd like to talk on the cert actually, if I could.
Yeah.
Other than Pat, if your barber might be available for consultancy or can engage. So on the Erasmus programme, and I think it was a very unfortunate decision on the part of the UK government, even respecting the Brexit decision, to withdraw from Erasmus, and I think there are even quite a number of those who campaigned on the Leave side who view that as unfortunate. Indeed, Universities UK made very clear that they thought it was a poor decision, because it does mean that students in the UK are now generally not going to be able to avail of perhaps one of the most successful European programmes. what the government decided to do, and it would be doing it kind of in partnership with the universities based here in the north, is that students from the north who wish to take part in the Erasmus programme, that they will be covered by the Irish government. It's something that we view as particularly important, and those opportunities for exchange, that they will be available. So this is something for students who may be attending UU or Queen's, or indeed in any of the training colleges, who want to look at Erasmus opportunities, that they are able to avail of that. There were challenges, interestingly, for the Erasmus programme in that
Could I just stop you there, Malcolm? You see, and that's great, and I'm very happy with that. But what I don't want is students coming to me, asking me, how do I access the Erasmus course? Why aren't the government putting advertisements in the Irish News or the Belfast Telegraph, or uploading stuff onto social media so that students can have access to that, or students' unions, or whatever? And that's what I'm saying about, you know, let's be more proactive.
Okay, no, except there have been quite a lot of discussions going on with the universities. There's obviously been a difficulty with Erasmus and exchange because of COVID, you know, the numbers, but certainly, I mean, I would anticipate, and from what we've been told, that for the academic year, you know, 2022, that things should be back at some level of normality. So, but certainly if there's individual queries that you know, from students, we can pass on. It's the Erasmus programme is managed by the Higher Education Authority in the South. I know there have been some queries so far, but you know, my understanding is it's still at an early stage, but operating reasonably well. But certainly the intention is that for students from the north who want to take part in Erasmus, that they will be encouraged and facilitated in so doing.
Okay. Yeah. Roisin?
I'm just wondering, is that not a Simon Harris issue that we should be able to flag with him if there is issues? Because as John, was it Pat?
Pat.
As Pat said, he shouldn't be sort of, you're so similar in your views and everything.
You go to the same barber.
That's more hair than
I was just thinking it shouldn't be that complicated. I know there was, Malcolm's right, but I mean, it's either available to them or not, it's not. So maybe that's something you should email one of us on. We can pick it up with Simon Harris directly. He's the Minister for
Further and Higher Education.
Further and Higher Education. So the buck stops with him on that. And on that note, Oisin Smith, my colleague, the buck stops with him with the COVID cert. So if you want to follow up with me directly on that, I can get straight on to him about that issue on the COVID cert, because the more than yourself, actions are what we need when we want to try and resolve problems. Just on the point you made though about Westminster, and you know, I know you're Sinn Féin and you don't accept it, and you know the UUP do, but in some ways that's not really relevant to the Northern Irish Protocol and what we're dealing with here, because no matter what your belief is in Northern Ireland wasn't really listened to when it came to deciding on Brexit, whether you were Sinn Féin or UUP or anybody else. So we are dealing with this situation irrespective of you know, the older issues. I think we have to kind of separate them in some ways, because otherwise we won't be able to move forward and find resolution, because every party in Northern Ireland wants what's best for Northern Ireland, and the businesses and the ordinary people, most of them are not too caught up with the politics of it all. They just want it to be done in a way that they can all survive and thrive in this lovely part of the country.
Sure. I just wonder too, maybe even if it's in order through you and through this committee, I do think Pat makes a really compelling case, because similarly, I know you had raised some stuff in the media about the digital cert as well.
Yeah.
And also aside from the practicalities of needing a digital cert, and that probably even becoming more the case in terms of restrictions in the south, there are people who just want the EU cert because they're entitled to it, and they want to avail of that entitlement and that service, and there shouldn't be any hindrance to them. But there are practical problems in accessing that, and whether it's that issue, whether it's the issue of Erasmus, I do think again we can articulate it from our committee that the government needs to be. It's all right to say, look, we've ensured this entitlement for you, and you'll be able to access Erasmus, you'll be able to access the EU digital cert, but then not actually communicate how you go about it. Listen, there's problems here, we're working on it, we're going to get it resolved. So a lot of people are left a bit in the dark. and maybe even through some of the committees here at the Assembly, whether it's the further and higher economy, whether it's health, that they can equally engage with their counterparts in the South or the relevant department to say, look, can you even furnish us with some of this information, because we're getting it into your constituency offices all of the time. But there does need to be, again, like Pat, I think it's really welcome that those entitlements have been preserved and have been saved, and we can avail of them, but they're not much use till if you can't actually get the bloody thing downloaded, or so.
I have been working on this issue quite a lot, obviously from a border constituency. It's more than practical. We need our COVID certs if we want to go into a restaurant or go to a pub or whatever of the weekends in Donegal. So it's really, really important. It's a very practical thing. I have a step-by-step how to do it on my Facebook, and that, because it's about cropping it and all the rest. But I'm not going to get into the technical details.
From this weekend as well, Sinead, to go into a nightclub in Donegal, you're going to
I'll be there at the weekend first.
Sinead, to get my dinner in the Lancer House canteen, I'm going to need a cert, so I really need it sorted.
So it is a real practical issue for residents in border regions. And the other thing about Erasmus as well, Erasmus, yes, okay, we can participate in Erasmus programmes, students in Northern Ireland, but the richness of Erasmus is about returning. You know, it's other students from other countries visiting here. It's a major income and has an economic impact, and that's not provided for within the context of the Erasmus programme. So whilst our students may be able to participate, the actual Erasmus programme is out of reach for Northern Ireland, and that richness is absolutely gone, and it is of value, and I regret it so much for our young people. So sorry, can I bring in Trevor now, because I realise that you're leaving early as well.
Yes,
Trevor.
Thanks for that, Claire. It's very good to see you here, folks, again. I want to just ask you a few things about trade, but first of all, you have a list here of recommendations arising from your report. Now, this is an interim report, I think, and it dates from July. Would that be right?
Correct.
This is now October. And when do you expect to issue your final report?
With the first or second week of December.
Some of these recommendations, I think they're excellent, and in fact they would mirror in a lot of ways some of the things we would be recommending up here. But I'm looking at number 40, for instance, the health one about the Northern Ireland planned healthcare scheme, which appears to be a bit more urgent and waiting for a decision in the middle of December.
Well, actually, we had a briefing yesterday on that very issue, and the draft heads of bill are it's being drafted, and it's what the administrative scheme that's currently in place will be put on a statutory footing, and it will be permanent, and they're expecting it to happen in Q1 of next year, and until it's in place the current system will remain, so there will always be coverage to access healthcare, and I believe the scheme that you have here is pretty much the same setup. So that there is full cover to maintain cross-border healthcare. And there's legislation on the way to make it permanent.
Good. I just picked that one out almost at random, but can you give us any more good news about other recommendations that have been brought forward in advance of your final report?
Nothing as of yet, in that I suppose we wanted to give a little bit of time for those recommendations to bed in. When they do, most of those will carry over to our final report. There'll be some additions on foot of our engagements the last number of months. So the way that it'll work then, we will have the Minister into the Chamber in December to talk about it, but in six months after that, we have the Minister that comes back in a follow-up session to actually give an update to the House on how they're progressing with implementing our recommendations. So we're expecting to have that then in June of next year to see how they're going with implementing all of that. So that's the plan.
Just to return to trade for a moment. I think we had this discussion one time before. Back in January, when everything kicked in, following a very messy agreement just before Christmas, I think business had a hard time for a while, no doubt about that. Partly because of misapprehension from across the water as to the difficulty of moving stuff across the Irish Sea for a while. But business does what business does, somebody else said earlier on. And the impression I get, I can only tell you from my own contact around Lagan Valley, that business is optimistic now. There's different degrees of optimism, but the terrible fear they had that they just wouldn't be able to get supplies and all the rest of it, that is gone. And I see various reports, various surveys, you know, they're a bit of a mixed bag, but the feeling would be that the two things that come out of it for me is that they're making do, they're doing quite well. They're doing increased trade, obviously, with the Republic. I don't think that's at the expense of trade across the RIC. We'll wait and see. And also, there's a very healthy welcome out there for what Dr. Šefčovič said and his latest proposals, which are, I don't mind what other people think, they're far-reaching, they're ambitious, they're very constructive, and they could be very useful for our economy and put us back towards the situation which was envisaged, as you have said, Lisa, that there's enormous potential in the protocol if we can just get it ironed out, put to bed, and start to work it properly instead of working against it. And also, the last thing I would say is there's considerable disenchantment. Others have referred to Lord Frost's comments the other day about north-south trade being a problem. I can't use the words because we're on Hansard, but really, that's an outrageous comment, absolutely disgraceful. Where's the man coming from? And that is leading to disenchantment, not just with Lord Frost himself, but with the British government in general, and the way they're handling this, and the offhand way that I believe that they're treating Northern Ireland. I mean, Boris Johnson made his conference speech the other day, didn't mention Northern Ireland, didn't mention the protocol. A Conservative and Unionist Prime Minister didn't, you know, where are they coming from? But I think our situation here at the moment is optimistic. I think business realises that. And they're a bit concerned about price increases, but I think they also realise those price increases are not necessarily coming because of the protocol. They're coming because of world trade problems, about supply chains, about the cost of energy, the cost of steel. You could go on. Those things are transient. They'll come round again. I can't see myself that the protocol is having a massive effect on our situation here. I'd be curious to know, I think, Niall, you said earlier on about you're waiting for figures about trade between the UK and Ireland and UK. Do you have an impression of how that's going? I mean, is that holding up?
No, I don't, and I mean, I'm not even implying that there's anything more sinister at play there, Trevor. I think it's just a case of whether it's cyclical or whenever they're due to come out, they wouldn't necessarily be published as regularly as the CSO statistics or the ESRI. So I would welcome them tomorrow because, as I say, I do think I don't see how they would be, you know, reduced as a result of the protocol, and as you rightly say, businesses adapting and doing what they do. But again, you know, I would rather kind of light a candle and curse the dark. So, I mean, once we see those statistics, I think that'll help us inform these kind of discussions much more reliably.
Right, okay, well...
So can you get them for us?
Yeah.
There wasn't much of a question in what I said, it was more of a statement, but thanks very much. Good to see you here.
Thanks, Trevor, and I think it's great to hear that view being expressed, that there's some positivity and optimism out there, and that's welcome.
Not the other out there.
I think there is a theme coming here that we need more data, we need more evidence, and we need more stats. And I think it's incumbent upon the UK government and the Irish government and the EU to start working collectively together. And certainly within the context of Northern Ireland, we need to do an awful lot more of that as well. Can I invite Diane Dodds now to address the committee?
Yes, so good afternoon everyone, and you're all very, very welcome. In case anyone thinks that I'm wearing some weird rosette and that they don't understand, this is to support Lucy's Law, which is to prevent, we're trying to introduce a private members bill here, which would outlaw the third-party selling on of puppies, and particularly in the light of the Spotlight programme last night. It's really important that we act to ensure that this trade, which is north and south and then carried on into the GB market through ports here, is curtailed and that it's barbaric. I don't know if anyone else has seen the programme last night. So just to explain my rosette.
I thought there was an election coming there.
Do you think there was an election coming?
I thought your dog was done the last jumping or something.
I think
Well, just in case you thought I'd done anything really, really weird.
how to change parties as well.
Dog trial.
Anyway, so down to the more serious business of today. I have listened very carefully to what has been said in the meeting so far. And there's a number of things that I want to say from a unionist perspective. And I think there's also, and I say it respectfully, so I don't want to get into this. I take this as an opportunity to dialogue, and I say it respectfully. We are sitting today here in a chamber in Northern Ireland, of the Northern Ireland Assembly, where, as John says, not one unionist member of this Assembly supports the protocol. Now, we don't arrive out of a planet out of the blue. We're reflective of the society that we represent. So, in reality, if you take nothing back today, I want you to take back that not one unionist in this House supports the protocol, and that we reflect the society we represent. Now, that is a very, very, very difficult and I would say dangerous place to be in Northern Ireland. And Chair, you, in your opening remarks, and I think it was in an answer to a question, just jotted it down very quickly, you indicated that, and I think I've written it down accurately, that the Irish government is doing its best to advocate for the island. I am a unionist. I believe that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, as the Belfast Agreement says, as and until its people vote to do something otherwise. And therefore, it is the United Kingdom government, and whether you like him or don't like him, its negotiator in Brussels, Lord Faust, who will be negotiating on behalf of Northern Ireland. And I think that we should be careful, and I am saying it respectfully, I think we should be careful in our use of language. Because I think if the protocol has done anything in Northern Ireland, it has isolated and marginalised unionism and many people from the unionist community. And I think that that is something that I want people to understand today, and specifically why I'm making myself so clear. I do want to engage in some of your recommendations, and I want to talk particularly also about data flows. Sorry, behind me. Data flows. But I want to make that absolutely clear. And I get the feeling that many politicians from Dublin and the wider Republic of Ireland either ignore or don't understand or just simply want to whitewash over those facts. So that is very, very important. What do I think the protocol is doing to Northern Ireland? I do think the protocol is damaging to Northern Ireland. It is damaging to Northern Ireland and its democracy. You yourself talked about the democratic deficit, that we are in a single market, that we are actually take laws and do not have any say in those laws at all, and that those laws will be arbitrated upon by the European Court of Justice. I want Northern Ireland to belong to fully and absolutely the United Kingdom's internal market. But the protocol has given a barrier between trade, between GB and NI, And I'll look at some of the stats around that in a moment. So I do think it is damaging to Northern Ireland democratically. I think it's damaging to Northern Ireland constitutionally. I think that it is wrong that one part of the United Kingdom, and I accept there are different allegiances in Northern Ireland, but one part of the United Kingdom is not treated the same in terms of goods, etc., and that part is Northern Ireland. If we look, for example, at the UK government proposals and the command paper of July and the EU proposals, I often wonder, do I read different documents to everybody else in this room? I genuinely do. And I speak as someone who has spent many years in the European Parliament as well. And when I look at the EU proposals, we're currently going through a deeper analysis of those proposals. But when I look at that, much of it lacks any substance. So it talks about 80% less checks, but it's 80% less checks of the rigorous implementation of the protocol, not the protocol light that we currently have at the moment, which I think still leaves us in a pretty awful position. It talks about some kind of system for goods not at risk of going into the EU single market, but it doesn't actually tell us what it's going to do in relation to that. For medicines, and I've just jotted this down very, very quickly, it says that medicines destined for the Northern Ireland market can be regulated by the UK, but that they would need to adhere to the ongoing application of EU legislation and the enhanced surveillance that would entail. That will not solve the medicine issue for Northern Ireland. And on SPS, it promises us less checks, but don't really tell us what it's going to do that. And all of this is imposed without the consent of unionism on the internal market of the United Kingdom. I don't know any other part of the world where that would happen. So, yes, I do think that we are damaging Northern Ireland. I think it's damaging to our democracy. I think that the EU proposals are, they do lack substance, they lack specific detail. And I also want to talk a little bit about trade. So there's been much sort of talk about Lord Frost's statement around North-South trade. I genuinely don't have it here with me, Trevor, so I can't interpret it and I don't know exactly what it says. But whether there is an increase in North-South trade or not an increase in North-South trade, and any increase in trade, the building of businesses, the greater prosperity for Northern Ireland and for families and jobs in Northern Ireland is always to be welcomed. But the vast and overwhelming majority of our trade is with the GB market. It's where we buy most of our goods from, and it's where we sell most of our goods to. In fact, we still sell more in GB than we do in every other part of the world put together. So if we add all the other trade stats and compare that with GB, that's where we still do most of our trade. So we are putting barriers between us and our biggest market. So yes, there are huge problems with the protocol, and there are huge problems for trade, and there are huge problems for the free flowing of that trade from one part of the United Kingdom to the other. And I suppose a practical example, I was at haulage firm in my constituency a couple of Fridays ago. Quite a substantial operation, quite a lot of trade across the world, across Europe, and obviously GBNI and North-South as well. They've almost given up coming through Dublin Port because of the long tailbacks of delays that they experience there and the checks that are imposed upon them there. So they've almost given up coming through there. They tell me that since January, they have added 4 additional people just to deal with customs checks. Now, those are not customs checks with the rest of the world or the rest of Europe. Those are customs checks within the UK's internal market between GB and NI, imposed by the protocol. They further tell me that the problem sometimes doesn't always lie in Northern Ireland, that the problem lies in GB, because we are a relatively small market. And therefore, firms have either said, I'm not just simply supplying to Northern Ireland because I can't be bothered with the additional paperwork, with the additional cost, with the hassle that it gives me. So they have that problem, or that they'll only do it at a specific time and by a specific time in the day because they need additional staff to do it. And therefore their lorry drivers end up waiting around much, much longer. Long story short, the additional cost to that business is 18 to 20%. Now, you can't absorb that in a business. That will be passed on to the end destination, the consumer. That is the result of the protocol. This isn't about worldwide trade for them. This isn't about trade with other parts of this island or other parts of Europe. This is about trade GB to NI. So if I leave you with nothing else, I leave you with that story. That isn't me. That is the haulage firm within my constituency. So yes, huge problems in relation to GB-NI trade. And we cannot keep going on like this. And I know there's been lots of things thrown around here today. You know, we've had talk about the fuel shortages in the south of England and none here in Northern Ireland. Of course, the fuel shortages in the south of England, there's no fuel shortage. There was a distribution shortage and a distribution issue. There was no fuel shortage in the south of England at all. There was no fuel shortage here because the distribution pattern is different, but we're supplied from Scotland. Not sure that the protocol or Brexit or anything else had anything to do with it. And I'm going to finish, because I enjoyed the bit of a tic-tac here between the two Sinn Féin members. And I must say, I am actually sort of surprised, I don't know, at their absolute attachment to Erasmus. When I was in the European Parliament, Erasmus only reached 9% of European youth and rarely reached any of the youth that many of us deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm rather surprised, and I am glad, and I am actually a supporter of Erasmus. But I mean, I think we should recognise its shortcomings and not be too dewy-eyed about what Erasmus does or doesn't do. And of course, the UK has launched its own replacement programme, which is actually a worldwide programme, which will enable students in the United Kingdom to actually engage in America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. All parts of the world can take part in that programme. So I think we're not losing that vision and that wider vision of the world in relation to that. And can I say, in relation to the issue of data adequacy, this is a huge issue, but of course it's largely a services issue, which is outside the scope of the protocol. So I'm just wondering, have you considered that within the bounds of your report? And again, I noticed that one of your recommendations is the mutual recognition of qualifications. My understanding of this, I could be wrong, but my understanding of this is that this is actually, the problem here is actually an EU one, which won't agree to a much wider form of mutual recognition of qualifications, and that the EU has insisted on this being done on a piecemeal, bit by bit basis. So I just maybe some comments around that as well, because I do think that the common travel area and the protections that the common travel area provide for us will actually, protect and allow us to continue on a reasonable basis. But I am interested in the data flows, because I have done some work with Chartered Accountants Ireland, for example, which operate north and south, and these are the kind of services businesses that I think, should there be differences, will have a problem.
Great. Diane, thank you very much. We very much appreciate the engagement. I think you've covered a lot of ground there. And
I do apologise, a bit more of a speech than I actually intended it to be.
Well, no, it was very structured actually, and I've taken some notes as well so that I can hopefully respond adequately to the points you've raised. I will defer to Malcolm on the data adequacy issue, because that is one of his topics, and perhaps Erasmus as well. I know there's been some developments. Actually, interestingly, there's a new programme being developed at an EU level called ALMA, which will allow students to, not just people to go to college, but young people to work abroad in trades and other types of work, to try and I suppose open it up to more young people, because you're right, it didn't cater for everybody. So that's
I'm going to interrupt in this, because Erasmus is something I did a lot about in the European Parliament, and it always amuses me that those who always go on about equality, etc., are so attached to Erasmus, which only reaches 9% of the European youth that it's supposed to reach.
Yeah.
And there are huge problems with Erasmus. There always has been. And for those who are on it, brilliant. It was very good. But it didn't open up the world to most young people.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent programme, but to try and expand the opportunities for young people, the fact that there will be a new programme to deal with that, I suppose is evidence that there was a gap there. And I think the Turing programme actually that's been launched by the United Kingdom is very good as well. So they're all good opportunities for young people. And I'll go back to Malcolm on the data issue. I'll just go through some of the points that you raised, Diane, just around, we will certainly reflect in our report the point you made very strongly, that there is no unionist support in this House for the Northern Ireland Protocol. I think you've made that point very clearly, and also take on board the point that you've made, that from your perspective that it is Lord Frost is the designated representative to speak for the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, that obviously. So we will certainly reflect those views, and there's no difficulty in that. You've said that you believe that the Northern Ireland Protocol damages Northern Ireland, and again we'll certainly take that on board. I would say there's probably an alternative view that would say that Brexit damages Northern Ireland, and that the protocol flows from Brexit. But again, take on board that there are very different views on all of that, and also.
So could I just come in there, because and I always rather have a conversation with people than. I mean, there was nothing inevitable about the protocol. The protocol was a choice. It was promoted by the Irish government. It was signed up to by Boris Johnson's government, but it doesn't have support here. And the issue really, the really big issue here is that the Belfast Agreement, and there were some people in this room made a great play of protecting the Belfast Agreement in all its parts. Now it seems we only protect the bits we want to protect. I mean, the Belfast Agreement sets up this very delicate balance of relationships, north, south, east and west. And I would suggest to you that the protocol is damaging the Belfast Agreement. It's not the inevitable consequence of Brexit. It was a choice. It was promoted by the Irish government. It was demanded by the Irish government. I was in Brussels the day that Leo Varadkar came, and we have pictures of customs posts at his colleagues on the European Council, something that I thought was absolutely reprehensible, because nobody was threatening violence, or at least nobody that I know was threatening violence. So it was demanded by the Irish government, and that's why unionism sees it as well as something that is also damaging those relationships north and south.
And I take on board the points you've made, and I suppose I would offer an alternative view. And I think I said this earlier in my comments, that the Irish government had a very clear position in top priority number one was to ensure no hard border on the island of Ireland. And in order to avoid a border on the island, because of Brexit and because of the United Kingdom coming out of the single market and the customs union, and the unique, the geography of the situation, the fact that you have two jurisdictions on one island, side by side, and then you had a situation where one would have been in the single market and customs union and the other wouldn't. And checks have to go somewhere. So the alternative, if we don't have the protocol, there are alternatives, you're right, it was a choice. But the choice on the table was quite unpalatable. And you were never going to have a choice or a solution that was going to please everybody. I think we all accepted that. And you rightly pointed out that the United Kingdom government negotiated this and signed off on it. But again, like with every government, you'll never have full support for some. It's unusual, I'd say, not never, but it's unusual. I would suggest that there is some support, many would say significant support for the protocol in Northern Ireland, but I fully accept it's not full support. But without it, the choice is you either put checks on the island or you put checks around Ireland, between Ireland and the mainland Europe. They were the options. And there was no perfect solution. But the reason that the protocol came out on top was because it was the option that ensured the top priority of the Irish government, no hard border on the island of Ireland, that priority. Alternatively, there was talk that you could have checks between mainland Europe and Ireland, but that would have damaged our position within the single market and the customs union. And again, I'm sure you can appreciate why in Ireland, and the position of the Irish government and the united position of the Oireachtas was that was not an option. So there were the three options on the table, and the one that was selected, or the one that was negotiated and signed by all sides, was the protocol. But my own view is that there was no option on the table that everybody agreed with. And nobody has yet to offer a solution as to how you just dispense with all checks, absolutely, because then you'd be ignoring the very loud voice of the European Commission, which has said some checks are required somewhere. That was the circle that we had to square, and that's why there's been such a strong focus from the Irish government, our committee, to try and find a way to make this as streamlined, as straightforward, as least impactful as it can be. But as I said to John earlier, I fully accept, and I'd say most members of the committee do, that the fact that the protocol exists in any form at all will be a problem for a significant period here. We get that.
But you accept, and I think we have to accept, that something in Northern Ireland that does not have the support of the unionist community. As I said, there is no unionist representative in this House that supports the protocol. Must mean that this is an untenable situation. You acknowledge that. I mean, I sometimes think it's kind of given to us as a kind of, you can take it or leave it, but that's what it is. But, that's not democracy. That's not, in a situation like Northern Ireland, helpful.
Well, I would say that my own view would be that the protocol wasn't just given to Northern Ireland as a take it or leave it. Certainly that wasn't the position of the Irish government. As you said yourself, the UK government negotiated on behalf of the UK. They negotiated the protocol, signed the protocol. That they're just, I suppose, the facts of the situation that we've had to deal with. And I would maybe suggest that if we had the very unimaginable situation of a border on this island, that you'd have a very significant community in Northern Ireland that would not be happy with that situation. So you can see the difficulty. But as I said, our focus really at the committee was to try and find solutions as to how we can, having been on a listening exercise within our own committee to hear what the views were of businesses, of citizens, north and south, what were the practical implications of the protocol and how can we ease those. We've tried to make that our focus. I think we're probably beyond the point of looking back on Brexit, on the negotiations that have already happened. All we can do now is try and look at the present moment and look forward. But there is the views that you've expressed would not be the views of a lot of stakeholders we would have engaged with through our committee. But as I've always said, we certainly respect that there are strong views, strong opposing views to the position that the protocol presents, and we will certainly reflect that in our report.
Malcolm?
If I, Diane, I might just start by mentioning that Haulier in your constituency, if they find Dublin Port to be too much of a difficulty, they're most welcome to come to Rosslare. There's lots of capacity in my own constituency, so I'll be happy to introduce them. And by the way, I agree with you around Erasmus. It's far from perfect. And I think the Turing programme, and particularly if we can look at ways, and particularly even cooperation between Ireland and the UK as the Turing programme starts, as an initial starter, could be advantageous. I think there are other, the EU Discover programme about Interrail. I would hope the UK government would look at taking part in that, because I think a lot of those programmes, there's still real opportunities for young people here in Northern Ireland, that they should have those possibilities. I know we didn't touch on it as well, but I equally think the whole area of Horizon and about access for universities here in the north to be able to access research funding, which is a broader issue. But just, I would agree, I think, on the data flow issue, and I know it is outside the protocol, and I think as an area of cooperation, and colleagues will worry that I've now found somebody who has a similar concern to me around this, but it has very serious practical implications for businesses on these islands. But for a small business that may be operating in Monaghan but get its payroll done in Armagh, if there's a change with regards to the data adequacy regime, that does present very significant problems. We know that on our side, when the data protection, our data protection commissioner came in before us, their office reckons that the cost to businesses in the south could be up to €1 billion in extra administration and paperwork if there was divergence there. So this may be, rather than us going into a huge debate on this, I think this may be something that we could look at cooperate, a very specific area to cooperate on. Could I ask just one question, Dan? Because I got your point around the.
It's terrible sitting with my.
Yes, I'm sorry, with the protocol, and it was just a point that you made where you said that politicians in the south, that we don't understand unionism's perspective on the protocol, and we do hold a different view. How do you suggest that we would engage more or learn more to understand some of those concerns? Because obviously you'll appreciate we're going to come from a different position, but how will we engage more broadly with unionism around those issues?
I think that the position of unionism, Malcolm, to be honest, has been really well articulated over the last number of months. I don't think anybody who is watching unionism with a view to listening to unionism, and that's the important word, will be in any doubt that the protocol is not supported by the vast swathes of the unionist community. And I mean, that is very stark in this House. Every time, I mean, I did a debate Monday, I think it was, on the issue of the protocol. And, the House divides on very, very predictable lines on that. But in Northern Ireland, where you have a very delicate balance, where the Belfast Agreement says, on these areas of controversy there should be, the consent from unionism as well as nationalism. On the protocol, suddenly Europe, indeed our government in London and Dublin have all agreed, no, it's a majority vote that's going to decide all of this. And I think it's this lack of listening, and it's almost like, if you sort of forgive the colloquial, they'll just have to suck it and see, like that's just the way it is. And that cannot be right. That cannot be right. So I think it's about listening, but it's about listening with open ears and hearts and minds. It's not, I will hold a different view. I hope I've expressed my view respectfully and forcefully. That is what no one who knows me will expect anything else. But, I also want people to acknowledge, to listen, to understand and to act. And I don't think we've had that a lot. And there's been a bit of an issue. And I do think, if I can just, and I know because I'm keeping the rest of you all back and I don't want to not do that any longer. If I can say, I think that there is a crunch decision coming for the European Union, for the Commission and for the Irish Government. And that really will be, are they using Northern Ireland to punish the UK for leaving? Or are they going to actually step up and preserve the peace and allow Northern Ireland to move forward? And if they are, I think those decisions we're coming to a crunch in those decisions, because we cannot in Northern Ireland continue where we're at.
Thanks, Chairs, and thanks, Diane. Actually, probably the first thing to say is that my colleague, Senator Lynn Boylan's working on similar legislation around the dogs issue, and it's maybe something that we could collaborate on going forward between the Assembly and the Seanad, given, as you say, the cross-border and cross-islands nature of that abuse, and I agree with you, it's horrific. Look, Diane, you'll know where I'm coming from on this issue, and you've heard what I've said thus far, and you know my party's position well. And in terms of the views that you've articulated here today, as I said earlier to John, we'll reflect that in our report, absolutely. We'll reflect it verbatim, if you want. But equally, we'll reflect that a majority of this House supports the protocol too. And it was a really interesting kind of to hear that understanding of democracy. You posed us the question, is it democratic if a majority of unionists don't agree with the protocol, yet a majority of this House do agree with the protocol?
Well, are you then saying that we should go back to majority rule?
No, I'm saying that...
Because that's not the Belfast Agreement.
No, I'm saying the institutions here are operating. Those institutions...
Well, they're supposed
in
to
the
be
Belfast
operating
Agreement.
the Belfast Agreement.
If there are ways that the unionist parties think that they can utilise the mechanisms of these institutions, then that's open and available to them. I'm glad that Trevor said that this is being taken down on Hansard, because I'm fairly sure I didn't mention fuel shortages. I think I spoke about chaos on garage forecourts, and we know that there was a shortage of haulage drivers. I also referenced Burr supermarket shelves, which you didn't reference in your own contribution, but that's fair enough. And I actually agree with you in terms of the issue of the mutual recognition of qualifications. That's something I've raised in the Seanad through questions and other debates. And look, nobody's saying if the issue there is with the EU side, we'll make the argument to them as forcefully and as comprehensively as we would to the British side that needs resolved. But again, the very fact that we are faced with this problem flows as a direct result of Brexit, and that's why we're faced with it. You also mentioned the Irish government not listening or not hearing the concerns of unionists and loyalists, and you're far better equipped to articulate that view than me. But again, respectfully, I would say perhaps a forum and a platform at which to articulate those views, to make your case and to ensure that they are heard, is through structures like the North-South Ministerial Council, is to get in the room with them and look them in the whites of their eyes and do the politics there. So I would just offer that up as a suggestion that we'll certainly convey what we can in our report, but seeing we're adhering to the Good Friday Agreement institutions, then I would have thought that would be the ideal place to articulate those fears and concerns.
Thanks, Baroness, for your lengthy contribution. Just want to clarify something. Maybe it's because I'm green or naive, but it kind of felt like you were almost criticising the Southern government on our dealings with the Northern Protocol. Maybe I picked up that wrong now. But what's confusing for me is, as a Baroness with the UUP, you would be part of the British establishment and Westminster government. So if there is an issue with the protocol, would you not be best fit bringing it back to those people that you're loyal to over in London, as opposed to putting it here to us as a Brexit Oireachtas committee just in one house of the Irish government? and it has to be said that the reason we're in this situation is because of the government that you're loyal to voted to leave Europe. So I just want to clarify that for the record. Thanks.
Right. So I'm really delighted that you've elevated me to the House of Lords. I certainly have not been elevated, and I am not a Baroness.
We're meeting them next month.
It's Wikipedia for you.
Yeah, we're meeting them next month.
So it's probably worth just putting that in the record as well. The other element of this is, I mean, we are in constant dialogue with our own national government, but I thought that the purpose of today was to understand, discuss and hear the voices of others. Yeah. I hope that I have done that. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I knew coming here that the UUP were against us, but we haven't really expanded on that, and we have an opportunity for you to submit maybe further information so we can put it into our report. That would be useful. Yeah. Look, we already knew that you were against the protocol coming here today, so it might be more useful if you could expand on that in some way and contribute to our report, or, as Niall said, bring it to the Northern Irish General
NSMC, North South Ministerial Council.
Well, of course, you do know the position in relation to that since the institutions of the Belfast Agreement are being trashed on an east-west basis, we are not prepared to engage in those institutions on a north-south basis. I mean, that is where it's at.
Okay,
those are difficult.
Would you engage with our Brexit committee?
Those are difficult times. Well, I am here today to do exactly that, and Emma is about to.
Yeah, she's about to explode here. So I think at that point, can I ask Emma Sheeran to make her put her point across?
I didn't realise she was in that screen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks a million, Sinead, for letting me in. I have another meeting at 4 o'clock, so I'm going to have to drop off. I wanted to ask some questions around sort of the rights implications of Brexit. I mean, we've listened there to the rewriting of history, and I mean, I can't go past without making comment on the bizarre position of the DUP and Diane's lengthy commentary there. I mean, we have to deal in reality. Yes, a majority of government officials from both the 26 counties, from the EU member states, our own party position was that we needed to see a protection against Brexit that the majority of people in the north did not want to see imposed on us by a UK-wide vote. And there are problems and hiccups with the implementation of the protocol that we have called for ironing out of. But the reality is that the alternative to that was going to be the reimposition of a hard border on the island of Ireland. And whilst there may be problems with trade between ourselves and the UK now, if you have a hard border on the island of Ireland, you're not just impacting trade or impacting a journey which already involves either a trip by air or over sea, because there is a sea between us and the UK. You're impacting journeys that are held, that take place every day by people from school to work, 2 minutes up and down the road. You're comparing apples and spuds, as Carol Nicole would say. So I have to make that comment first and foremost. I wanted to ask some questions around the Frontier Worker Scheme. And again, refers to the border. We had heard that the scheme was going to be implemented for people that are living in the 26 working in the north, and I wanted to know if any of the reps from the Seanad Committee had feedback from constituents around that, because obviously a lot of these things we haven't seen the full implications of yet, because we have been in the pandemic and people have been working from home and not travelling as much as they would have been in an ordinary year. We see a couple of weeks ago Dominic Raab and the Tory government telling us that they're rethinking the Human Rights Act. We had the comments that we did around misogyny and the obvious lack of understanding around even what that term means. So there are fears and worries for people who identify as Irish passport holders in the north around rights going forward and what we're going to see as we move on following Brexit, the loss of the European protections that we have previously had. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma, and thanks for bearing with us and coming in to say some words. To be fair, I think in the last occasion when we engaged with you, you brought up citizens' rights again. So I know it's been a common theme in your contributions, and We were very keen to reflect that in the last occasion, and we will certainly be putting that. There will be a considerable section in our final report as well on that issue. I don't know what the views are of other members, but I think that's one of those areas where it probably didn't get enough attention at the outset, because a lot of the focus was on trade. And it is one of those areas we're starting to see, as things settle somewhat, we're starting to see some of the deficiencies there. And I think we've a lot of work to do in that space, I suppose, if I can make that point. And not all the solutions have yet been articulated or found. So I don't know if other members have a view on that, but I think, unfortunately, it wasn't at the top of the priority list initially, but it is certainly a key area of concern for all of us. And I think an interesting point you made around, because of the pandemic, we probably haven't seen the full impact as well. That's absolutely true, I would say, as you know, we've discussed that ourselves as well, that it's very hard to get a true picture when you're still in the middle of a global pandemic, which is, I suppose, extraordinary times that we're living through, really, between Brexit and the pandemic. And probably will take us a little bit of time to get that full information. But I would hope that even when we do publish our final report in December and we get an opportunity again 6 months after that to follow up on recommendations and see where things are at that point, I don't think we envisaged when we started the Brexit Committee over a year ago that so much would be happening with it, or that it would still be in such a state of flux. So I've no doubt that even in 6 to 8 months' time, we'll still be dealing with a lot of these issues. But hopefully we'll have some progress, I would hope, at that point. So,
no, I mean, look, Emma, you know the issues too, and I'm sure you're picking them up from constituents. I would always make the case, and again, I think it's maybe something that the committee can look at. You'll appreciate that there's a huge range of issues of concern, from citizens' rights right through to the trade, data, all agriculture, medicines, everything that we all know and understand. And actually, I think the Chair's right. I think we have acknowledged that we probably could have done better in the earlier stages around the issue of citizens' rights. And I think we just collectively, right across the board, right across institutions and everything else, need to keep a watch and brief on that, because I do think you're right. That will become probably further apparent as we emerge out the other end of the pandemic. And there are rights that are afforded to us, you know, that have been lost, or entitlements that have been lost as a result of Brexit. But I made the point earlier on, I think even our committee of the Oireachtas, other committees of the Oireachtas, need to understand, I suppose, for want of a better term, the domestic responsibilities that the government have, particularly in and around Article 2, and given effect to Article 2 of the Constitution. So what does it actually mean to give someone the birthright and entitlement to be part of the Irish nation? I would like to see the sentiment of that article lived a wee bit more in practical reality, and in terms of that. And the other big democratic option that's available to us all, that we need to be respectful of as Democrats, is a democratic pathway back to the European Union that's provided for in the Good Friday Agreement as well. Now, the Chair will probably be saying that the committee hasn't come to a position on that, and we haven't, and it's important to say that. We would all have our own individual views on that, but certainly we need to get to the point where we are very alert to not just the issue of what rights are lost, but alert to how we're going to rectify and address the issue of lost rights to ensure that people aren't disenfranchised where they don't need to be.
Have you any other questions, Emma?
Trying to unmute myself. No, Gormagan, Chair, that's brilliant, and obviously I would echo a lot of the comments that are made there, and it is something that constituents will talk to me about around, I suppose, Pat's earlier remarks around the passport really brought it into focus this summer, where we were in the COVID situation and travel was massively impacted, and there were these different requirements on people. And you could see how strongly people feel about the fact that they have an Irish passport, and they wanted to have the same arrangement as their neighbours in the 26 counties when it came to travelling abroad, and they didn't want to be, and I suppose post-Brexit even more so, but they didn't want to be, treated as part of a different system. And we, in conversation and anecdotally, you'll get that all the time, that people when they go abroad, people will ask where they're from and they'll say Ireland, and our wee country is known across the globe as being the land of saints and scholars and good crack and Guinness. So you always get that perception, and people wanted to feel part of that. So the commentary that Niall has given there around the protection we need to see coming from the 26th county government are key to that, because that's people's identity and that feeling of inclusion that they so rely on.
I promise we didn't tic-tac on that.
Sorry. Senator Garvey,
just on the point of information on the COVID certs, over 10,000 have been distributed in the north to our citizens already, and the Minister has sent me an email I can share with people here who have been contacted by the constituents to get on to him directly about any issues they're having, but they have successfully distributed over 10,000 to date.
Brilliant. Thanks,
okay.
Roisin.
Thank you very much. And our final member, Pádraig Delargy, do you want to come in to the spotlight?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay, Sinead?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Can't see you.
Yeah, not to labour the point, but I do think it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that I actually engaged in 2 Erasmus schemes, one at university and one during my time at school. And particularly for my generation, I think it's been something that has given us the opportunity to really develop that pro-European identity. It's been something that's vital to my generation, and I think that the outworkings of that have been seen, Diane, in your constituency as well, that young people across the north voted overwhelmingly against Brexit, that they voted overwhelmingly to remain as part of Europe, and that inclusive, progressive and forward-looking agenda is something that schemes like Erasmus very, very much contribute towards. So I just want to move on. I suppose my second question there, Lisa, is probably for yourself, really. Just on what level of communication there has been between ministers on both sides of the border, so in the north and the south, in relation to post-Brexit working. So I'm thinking of Minister Swan and Minister Donnelly in terms of cross-border health directive replacement schemes, and what level of communication there's been.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pádraig, for your comments. The first, I would agree with you on Erasmus about the positive impact, and you're right about getting that positive relationship between young people and the European Union. So we would have had the same experiences as well as that. In terms of ministerial engagement, I'm probably not in a position to give you exact numbers of engagements, or we are consistently told that there is constant engagement, constant dialogue. I know that Minister Donnelly has engaged with Minister Swan on health issues, on the cross-border healthcare issue. We got an update to committee yesterday from the department officials that the administrative scheme that was the kind of sticking plaster, if I can call it that was put in place for this calendar year, that will remain in place until Q1 of next year. The heads of the bill are being drafted, and it will be put on a statutory footing at the earliest opportunity next year. So there won't be a gap in cover, if I can put it that way. That cross-border healthcare on the island will be maintained, and I believe there's a similar scheme here in Northern Ireland as well. So that's been actively worked on. So all I can say to you is that what we're being told is that there's consistent engagement with ministers, but I can't speak for individual ministers, and that's probably as much information as I can put before the committee. But thank you for your comments, Pádraig.
Okay, no problem. Just on that again, I did obviously mention the fact that Erasmus is run through schools as well, and I appreciate that at the minute your focus is on making sure that university students have access to it, but I would just like to note for your committee as well if that could be extended to making sure that schools have access to that.
Let Malcolm come in.
Yeah, just to add, Pádraig, I think that is the case. I think we've got to look at broadening Erasmus. I mean, Lisa mentioned in the past there used to be a Leonardo programme that focused very much on training as well. I think the more opportunities in terms of education and training exchange, the better. I think we do need to look at it in terms of touring. I mean, there used to be a youth exchange programme that operated on these islands called Causeway, and I think that would be particularly useful. If I can say, I welcome the fact that you say that it is important, Erasmus being part of a progressive pro-European agenda. I would, I suppose, point out, if we're going to do it, that my party consistently held that view over a long period. We never felt that any part of this island should take its place outside of the European Union. We've always supported that, and I think just speaking on a personal basis, I would certainly hope that at some stage in the future that the UK would consider rejoining. But we obviously we respect, and our committee is very clear about, we respect the democratic decision of the UK people in its referendum. And obviously, when the UK government enter into an international agreement, we respect their negotiating stance, but equally we respect that when that agreement is entered into freely, that they will honour all parts of that agreement.
Chair, could I make a really brief point too? Yeah. I suppose it's worth pointing out that our committee take wee digs at each other too. Just in case anybody didn't pick up on that. But in terms of Padraig's point,
were you going to let me in there?
Let you in after.
Okay, I didn't see him in to get in before me. Sorry.
Sorry. Do you want in?
No,
Rosie?
Go for it. You started now. Knock yourself out.
I started, so I might as well finish. But it was announced last week by the Commission Chair that they would be releasing 60,000 free travel passes for 18 to 21-year-olds throughout the EU. And I know the South will have got an allocation. I think it's based per population to apply. I've been trying to get some clarity around whether young people here will be able to apply for that travel pass as well, because, as I say, it's all part of it.
Not at the moment. It's EU citizens at the moment, 18 to 20.
So EU citizens. So if you're an EU citizen resident in the north, will you be able to apply for that? So that's just another example, Chair, of where we just need to get that kind of clarity, and certainly our committee will look at that. But I know Padraig would have a particular interest in that kind of issue. So it's just the more voices articulating this, I think, the better.
Absolutely.
No, just on a point of information, Erasmus isn't the only programme there. I know Diane mentioned another programme as well, but in case you weren't aware, in schools in Northern Ireland are part of eco schools, and we call them green schools down the south, but there's a whole global movement of eco schools around a lot of Europe and all around the world, and there's plenty of opportunities there for second level students to do exchanges through the eco schools programme. Now I think we're with Sinn Féin, I'm coming from a green perspective, but everybody's wearing the green cloak these days, so that's great. So maybe it's something you can look into in schools if you're looking for exchanges. It doesn't have to be all about Erasmus. And also I find sometimes with Erasmus it can be for certain cohorts in society, and not everybody who is as well off as other people always get to go on Erasmus. Whereas with eco schools, it's done in a very low budget way where you stay with families and you don't necessarily have to come from a privileged background to take advantage of it. I know my experience with Erasmus in the past, it was usually the more privileged families that got to use it. So just a point of information, eco schools, we call it green schools down in the south, but it's first, primary, secondary and third level, and you have huge opportunities there to delve into lots of different interesting countries all around Europe, not just in the EU. I went to Moldova with them, lots of places, so I'd say look into that.
No, thanks very much for that. And actually, I don't know if you're aware, but I was a primary school teacher up until mid-September, so I know eco schools very well. Around those schemes, obviously, there's such a breadth of schemes, and I think that one of the points that we have to take from this was what Niall mentioned earlier, that those need to be put together and make sure that that information is clear, because even from this committee or from the two committees, each of us have come up with several different schemes. So if those were able to be put together and a clear format that was easily accessible, particularly to schools in the north, I think that would be something that we could work collectively on and would be very easily done coming out of this meeting.
I think that's a point well made, and we should progress that, absolutely. I've kind of got this premonition and vision of the Dairy Girls programme, where the blackboard was up and what Protestants like and what Catholics like, and and it's a bit around the protocol, where the minister has said no unionists like the protocol or not for the protocol. I don't think anybody likes the protocol. what we really don't like and what we really believe is that Brexit does damage Northern Ireland, and what we want is to ensure that we protect the island and as lean and as mean as we can get the protocol and the barriers are raised, the better for all of us. Obviously, the constitutional issues in and around it, I think it will be very hard to get any agreement around it, but I think today's meeting has been very open, has been very honest, it's been very productive. We covered an awful lot. We talked about the democratic deficit, and it's a reality. It's there. We've talked about trade flows and customs and the lack of trading evidence, and that really concerns me. And I think that we have got economic development agencies on this island and between our islands, and for Enterprise Ireland, Intertrade Ireland, IDA, Invest NI and UKTI. I think it's incumbent upon them to work collectively together to gather that evidence and present that evidence. And whilst they might be competitors in some way, there's synergy between them that could help support businesses in this island and between our islands. So I would like to see more work in that particular end so that we can actually analyse and have data that stacks up. And you know, to say you don't like something, if it ultimately benefits once we overcome some of the obstacles, our citizens, then we as public representatives must ensure that we do the right thing for the people that we represent as well. And it's fair to say, Diane, you know, the majority of this Assembly is supporting the protocol in the absence of other solutions. And it's the hard Brexit that was the choice that has left us with a very inadequate solution, which is the protocol, which we are trying collectively to work through. But can I thank members from...
Chair, could I come in there since I was addressed directly?
Yes, you can.
I mean, I'm not disputing that, and every vote in this House does say that. But the Belfast Agreement is the child of the SDLP, and it is very, very strange to hear the SDLP actually saying, on this occasion only maybe, I support majority rule. And I'm not supporting the balances and the checks that were set up by the Belfast Agreement. It's very strange, and I just want that on the record.
We will agree to disagree in that, and I don't even think today is the place. We're trying to be in solution mode to have those conversations. For goodness sake, we have them at least once a week in this chamber, and we're not making progress in that, but we are making progress in some of the barriers that our citizens face regarding green cards, regarding pet passports, and all of the areas, medicines, etc. We are making progress, and the more that we do that, the better. And I, on behalf of our committee here, would like to thank your committee for taking the time and the due diligence and work that you have done in this report. We look forward to the completed report in December, and we would welcome you back, and perhaps we would even visit you in your home ground the next time to get some more update and hopefully further evidence that we can move forward and represent the collective society here within Northern Ireland and on islands and between our islands.
Chair, if I might just some closing remarks, just on behalf of our own committee and the clerk, to say thank you for the invitation to be here today and the engagement with yourself, Chair, and with all of the members. It's been, I think, really useful. We've covered a lot of topics, a lot of areas, and we very much just want to reiterate once again, very much appreciate getting different views. It's really important. There's no point in being in an echo chamber. That's not going to provide any way forward or pathway forward. And if I might, Chair, just extend an invitation to your committee to come and visit us in Leinster House at a time that is suitable and convenient to your members, we would love to have you visit our chamber and engage with us in our chamber, in our house. So perhaps the clerks of both committees can engage on that front and see if it's possible to arrange something that suits you to come and visit. So just to say thank you, and we look forward to continued engagement, and we will of course forward you a copy of the report as well when we do publish it in early December.
Following this meeting, I think we're going to get an opportunity to have a chat and a cup of tea, some refreshments, and all of that. And the last piece of business that I have really is just to get the meeting closed off. So I will move to number 8 in the agenda. Any other business? Can I ask, have members got any other business that they would wish to raise? No? Okay. Well, the date and time of the next meeting, it's going to be following Halloween recess. I only found out today that my life has kind of gone out and my calendar's gone out that we are going to be in Halloween recess next week. Whoa. So our next meeting is the 3rd of November and at 2 p.m. in room 30. Okay, thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber Programme Sound.